workshop is the second part in our lesson planning series on effective lesson planning and the importance of making sure that we've planned thoroughly and we've thought about what we would like to achieve with our students. So the objectives of this workshop is to think about and understand the importance of lesson objectives themselves, objectives for your own lessons, what you would like to achieve at the end of each lesson with your students. We're going to have a look at and review what makes an effective lesson plan. And then we're going to think about how we can reach all learners. I know in the past people have brought up how they have very large classes and it's hard to reach everybody. So we're going to have a look at a few strategies that could help to support that. So learning objectives then, why are they important? So imagine if somebody told you to leave your house, to go somewhere, just to go out, start walking, turn left, go right. But there's no real reason or no purpose for that walk. Sometimes we wonder why we're doing things. If we don't know where we're going, then we won't know how to get there. And this idea applies to learning objectives in our lessons. It's really important that we know as teachers where we would like to get to with our students so that we can be certain of what we want to achieve. And then we can think about the steps it needs to get us there. This is the foundation of a lesson plan, our learning objectives. What do we want our students to learn by the end of each lesson? And following on from that, what do we need them to learn in order to be prepared for the final examinations? And what do they need to do to get there? So we need, when we're planning, to think about an objective. What will the children need to do to reach success by the end of the lesson, by the end of the unit, by the end of their school career? So if we have a look at this image then, this kind of gives us a few ideas of the problems if we don't have lesson objectives. The learners, they can't see how what they are learning may connect with previous learning. So they don't see the purpose, they don't see the point. There's misunderstandings in the classroom and it creates confusion, it creates demotivation, and students don't see the point. So then we have behavioural issues to manage. So therefore, if we can set out effective lesson objectives, give our students a reason for learning and what they are doing and why they are doing it, then they will understand how it will shape their learning journey, how they will be moving forwards. So we need to make sure our learning objectives are clear for us, clear for the students, so that we can set them out in student speak so they will understand the reason for doing the tasks that you are asking them to do. So learning objectives are extremely vital when we are planning lessons. We need to know what they are learning, why they are doing it. It's part of the bigger picture, if you like. See the point of the objectives, how they link to previous learning, how they will link to future learning, and what they are doing today and how it relates. Thinking about the overall goal of the lesson and therefore the whole unit. Learning objectives, again, are the foundation of an effective lesson plan. When we are organising and planning our learning objectives for units and for lessons, sometimes a good idea is to start with the end in mind. We need to know where we want our students to get to and then work backwards. How will we get to those learning objectives? So what do you want your learners to know by the end of the lesson? And what do they need to do in order to get there? And then that will make sure that the purpose of your lesson is clear. It makes it easier to plan. And then you can assess the learning, whether they've achieved those objectives at the end of the lesson. You as a teacher will also know where you need to move to following on from that lesson. So you can devise your next set of objectives and how you can move your students forward in their unit of study. And when we write our objectives, when we formulate them, it's a good idea to use SMART objectives so that they are specific, they are measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So what is it that you want your children to learn? How will you know if they've achieved it at the end of your lesson? What will you do to measure the learning? Whether you have the knowledge, the students have the knowledge, the resources that they need. Are your learning objectives achievable for that lesson? Do they build on what they already know? And then have you catered for the lesson time? Have you got enough time with your students to achieve that learning objective? So it's important to make sure you keep these in mind when you formulate your objectives. So have a think about a lesson that you would need to teach this week, perhaps, and think of your subject. Can you have a look at the words in the box and then try and formulate some lesson objectives? Please, can you type some into the into the chat box, some typical learning objectives that are suitable for students that you teach.
Okay, chat box, here we go.
What could be a typical lesson objective for a student in a maths lesson, for example, who are learning algebra or even fractions?
Okay, the learners, where is it? Able to
Welcome to everybody who's just joined us. Thank you for joining this afternoon.
must be able to describe the maybe moment of fun.
Anybody got any ideas for a maths lesson? Tandy, wonderful. The learners must be able to describe the moment of conflict as the event unfolds. Great, lovely. So for an English lesson, I'm guessing that could be, they could concentrate on a moment of conflict taking place in the story. So that would help them to use their comprehension skills, their evaluation skills, understanding skills. Anybody else got any suggestions for their own subject, perhaps, of a typical lesson objective?
Okay. Sarah, being a language
Yes.
teacher, I can't help you in maths.
No, I
can
know.
only
I'm an English teacher as well. So I'm just trying
yeah.
to throw out a different subject. Perhaps it would be to understand by the end of the lesson, is that one of our words? Or to name, no, to solve, that's a maths word, isn't it? To solve 5 questions using, to solve 5 algebra questions. That could be one for a maths lesson. I'm not familiar with maths.
Or maybe name
Mamandili?
the fractions
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
maths.
We've got
Yes.
describe the tone of the character in a particular extract. Lovely, thank you.
Yeah.
So these are smart learning objectives so that we can help the students to understand what they are
Or
going to be
maybe
learning
to complete
and why they are learning.
the timeline. Complete the timeline. The task. Next.
So learning objectives could be relevant to an actual task that they need to complete, or it could refer to the actual learning, what they need to have understood by the end of the lesson. And sometimes it's good to have a mixture of maybe one or two learning objectives, one that relates to a task-based objective and one that's understanding-based objective, so that we can make sure that our students know what they need to do and what they hopefully should be understanding. Okay, let's move
Let me
forward
just
then.
add
So,
one here.
oh,
No.
sorry, Tandy, have you got another one?
No, I'm just for language. I just want to I'm completing it. They completed the timeline when the protagonist experienced self-discovery until
Okay, I'm going to move on with the next slide and we'll have a think. We'll
okay.
refer back to lesson objectives later. So let's have a think about effective lesson plans as a whole. We should always be making a lesson plan rather than going into our classes unprepared. It's not fair on us because we end up having to deal with more classroom behavioural issues, and it's not fair on the students because they don't get meaningful learning. So going in prepared will allow for us to develop our confidence. It will make us feel sure and certain in what we're teaching, and it will allow the students, well, it will give the students purpose, a clear purpose for learning, a clear reason for learning. So a good lesson plan should include the following elements. I've already mentioned clear objectives. It's a good place to start. Think about what you would like your students to achieve by the end of your lesson, and then work out how they are going to get there. What do you need them to understand? Consideration of our students' needs. We're going to have a variety of different students' abilities and attainments in our classroom. We're going to have a different range of needs and different learning styles. So we need to take that into consideration when we are planning our lessons. We need to devise activities that can produce tasks that suit different learning styles. So it's not just directed at one particular learning style, and therefore other students struggle to access the learning. We need to think about our resources, our materials, make sure that we've got them, make sure we're ready and prepared, and that all students have access to them, whether it's worksheets, whether it's electrical equipment, or whatever you may be using. It's important to make sure you've got that in place. If you walk into a lesson without that in place, then it may result in a very disorganized, haphazard kind of lesson. Again, that leads to behavioral issues and classroom management issues. Think about the range of activities that you're going to include. Make sure your lesson is quite pacey. What that means is you move from one activity to the next activity to the next activity. So this doesn't make the students become bored. They will get bored, and again, that will lead to classroom management issues, which is wasting effective learning time. You will know your students. You will know how fast or how slow you need to move through the different topics that you're teaching. But again, there's different ways that you can approach activities, and it's important to remember this. Instruction and presentation of information is an important part of your lesson plan. Clear, slowly set out instructions so the students know what they are expected to do. Sometimes it might be good to ask students to repeat the instructions back to you to make sure that they do understand and they're clear on what they are supposed to do. They might have gotten tangled up in the way that you've described something. You might need to describe it in a different way or instruct in a different way. It's good to use our students to do that as well. We can use our students as resources to explain instructions in a way that other students may understand. Don't forget to give time for students to practice, to work through the activities. Give them timely reminders. So, for example, the activity that I've set out for you should last 10 minutes. So you give them clear time frames. And then towards the end of the activity, Give them a time warning. We have 2 minutes left. You should be coming to the end of your paragraph by now. So they should know what kind of pace they should be working at. Always factor in time for assessment. We need to think back to those objectives and we need to assess whether our students have achieved those objectives. So factor in time at the end of your lesson plan to check for learning. It may be in a question and answer format. It may be a quiz format. It may be a presentation from the student of their work, which will then give you an idea of how well they've understood the topic that you're teaching and where you need to move to next with your objectives. And make sure that you are working in line with the standards of your department, your school, your curriculum. So everyone is on the same page, so to speak. A lesson plan takes a different format depending on different schools. It might look something like this, where you have your date, your subject, your learning objective at the top, and then your success criteria, how well you know that your student have achieved those objectives, how you are going to work through your lesson plan. So think about your knowledge review from previous learning, introduction of the new lesson, an explanation. You might need to model something to show students how to do something they need to see in order to carry it out themselves effectively. You may change the task into a pair group or group work. There's different ways to approach different tasks. And again, it depends on the students you have in front of you, because that will dictate the learning styles that you need to cater to. Again, at the end of the lesson, think about leaving time to assess your students. This part of the lesson is normally or often forgotten or rushed through, but it's actually quite a critical part. Assessment for learning. Have they moved forward since the beginning of the lesson? How far have they moved forward? Do you need to revisit something in a different way? There may be a specific lesson plan that your school or your institution uses. You will know that better than me. But if not, something like this is the kind of thing that you need to use. Lesson objectives, maybe a starter activity while everybody's getting settled down, an introduction to your main lesson. Then you've got your main body of the lesson, and then the plenary, that assessment part, which is critical for you to understand what went well and how you are going to move forward. So the final part of the workshop is to think about how we reach all of those learners in our classroom. Some of us, we have very large numbers of students. They all learn in different ways, and it's our responsibility to think about making sure they all can access the curriculum. We need to vary our lessons, vary our methods, so that everyone is included. This is actually called differentiation or personalizing the learning. It is our responsibility to make sure even the weaker retainers as well as the stronger retainers at each end of our classroom, of our groups of learners, they can all access the learning. So it's up to us to make sure we walk in with a clear lesson plan. A way of managing larger classes, or different ways, I found a little video for us to watch to give you some thoughts and ideas. Fingers crossed this will work for us. Make sure we're sharing the sound. Here we go.
I'll go. Come on, buddy. I'll go.
Come on, internet. Don't let me down today. Here we go.
Hello, Kaguro. We have another video, and this will give you examples of differentiated strategies used in classroom teaching. Let's start.
Number 1, create learning stations. Provide difference of content by setting up learning stations, divided sections of your classrooms through which group of students rotate. Each station should use a unique method of teaching a skill or concept related to your lesson. Example, watching a video, creating artwork, reading an article, completing puzzles, and listening to your teacher. Number 2, use task cards. Like learning stations, task cards allow you to give students a range of content. Answering task cards can also be a small group activity. Set up stations around your classroom and pair students together to rotate through them. You can individualize instruction by monitoring the pairs, addressing knowledge gaps when needed. Number 3, target different senses. A lesson should resonate with more students if it targets visual, tactile, auditory, and kinesthetic senses instead of only one. When applicable, appeal to a range of learning styles by playing videos, using infographics, providing audiobooks, getting students to act out a scene or role-playing, incorporate charts and illustrations within text, giving both spoken and written directions to class, using relevant physical objects such as money when teaching math skills, allotting time for students to create artistic reflections and interpretations of lessons. Number 4, use the think, pair, share strategies. The think, pair, share strategy exposes students to 3 lesson processing experiences within one activity. As the strategy's name implies, start by asking students to individually think about a given topic or answer a specific question. Next, pair students together to discuss the results and findings. Finally, have each pair share their
So
ideas
here
with
is
the
the
rest of
second
the
part
class
with
and open the
you
floor to further
on
discussion.
the concept
Number 5,
of
make time for
history.
journaling. When possible at the end of class, give students a chance to make a journal entry by summarizing key points they've learned, attempting to answer or make sense of lingering questions, explaining how they can use the lessons in real-life scenarios, and illustrating new concepts which can be especially helpful for data-focused math lessons. Number 6, gallery walk. Gallery walk is a classroom-based active learning strategy where students are encouraged to build on their knowledge about a topic or content to promote higher-order thinking, interaction, and cooperative learning.
Okay, so as I said, there's a few ideas there. It was very quick, but this workshop will be available to re-watch following on from this workshop, from the live. But while I was thinking about doing this PowerPoint today, I was thinking about lots of teachers who do have very large classes. And a good place to start is to make sure that you establish your rules and expectations of your classroom. And make sure that your students know what is expected of them. Okay, it's your classroom, it's your space. It may take time for students to understand how life works in your classroom, but you need to be consistent. You need to establish how things are going to run in your room because you are the leader of that classroom and you are leading your students forward. Eventually, after time, they will understand your expectations and they will start working in a more focused and progressive style. Try and keep relaxed and keep motivated. Always be positive, patient in your room and show students how they are moving forward. Keep them on side, develop relationships with your students. This will really develop your respect for them, their respect for you, and your working relationships will be very positive, even in larger classrooms. They will support you, they will work and work for you as well as with you. Visual aids are an excellent way to keep students engaged, especially in large classes. I use visual aids quite a lot in my classroom. When I'm developing and delivering my instructions, I have a copy of them on the board behind me, showing students in word form what I am actually saying, so that they can focus on the different colours, the different boxes, the different layouts that I've used on my presentation. I use highlighting quite a lot in my PowerPoints to draw attention to certain keywords, and I do this for my students as well as you can see for adults too. They're an excellent way to keep students engaged. Group projects are good when we have very large classes. Students working together will become enthusiastic, they will become motivated. It can be a bit of a challenge to monitor, to work with group work as your role changes. You become more of a facilitator than a leader, but it's still important to show students different learning styles and give them a chance to try out different learning styles rather than just yourself delivering content at the front of the room. Peer teaching is a really good technique, and I try and use this in my classroom quite a lot. We have a wide variety of abilities and entertainers in our room. It's really good to use our students to teach others. It's the best way of learning, is to teach something yourselves. So I would ask stronger students to maybe come out the front if I feel that they are confident enough to deliver a topic in a way that maybe the students could understand and become more connected to than just myself teaching it. In small groups, I would appoint a leader, perhaps, who could deliver the content again in a even more student-friendly way than perhaps I could do it. Peer teaching is a great technique for those of you who have larger classes. Again, in those small groups, you could have a rotational use of resources so that groups could move around the room and access activities in different ways. Again, assessment methods, you could use your peers, you could use presentations, you could use quick quizzes before they leave the classroom. So there's lots of different techniques that you could use to cater for those larger classes. Again, it takes time. Relationships are really important. In previous workshops, I know Tandy talked about relationships, student-teacher relationships as something really important. So I've given you a lot of information this session. I'd like us to reflect about learning objectives. Learning objectives, again, the foundation, the root of a good lesson plan. It's important to walk into our classrooms thoroughly prepared and planned so that we know what we want our students to achieve and how they are going to get there. And it's important to share this with our learners so they can understand the purpose of learning and become more motivated in their own learning journey. I've given you a variety of techniques that you may or may not like to use in order to try and reach all those different learners that we have in front of us on a day-to-day basis. Again, the workshop will be available once it's been edited, and you can have a look at all the different previous workshops. We have a variety of courses on the Teach2030 website, which goes into more detail about larger classes, about teacher techniques, about methodologies. Please do have a look at the courses and email any one of us here at Teach2030 if you have any more questions. Please share us with your colleagues as well. Some of us may be very experienced in doing lesson planning, but it's always important to stay refreshed. Our world is changing, students are changing, ways of learning's changing. So we need to stay mindful of how we can change our teaching and our delivery in order to meet the different challenges that we can face in our classroom. Our responsibilities and our duties we have are for our learners to be successful. So we need to make sure we're up to date in different styles of learning. I want to thank you all for joining us today in our effective lesson planning session. This is part 2 of effective lesson planning. Part 1 you will find on our website in the archive, and when you complete all 3, you will receive a certificate. Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anybody who would like to make any contributions before we close this session about lesson planning, about learning objectives, anything that's happened in your classroom? Please put your hand up, or you can just unmute and start talking to me. Okay, well, in that case, I want to thank you all very much for joining us today. please keep in touch with us. Please make sure you use all of our resources on our website. Thank you again, and goodbye for today.
Okay, Sarah, before goodbye, the
Oh, okay,
video that you
Tandy.
played, yes, the video that you played, I don't know, on my side, the audio was not that favorable.
Okay,
And
I'll
yeah,
double check that, and maybe you could rewatch
yeah,
it if you had a look back over at when we put it on the website.
okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
Most informative. Again, I needed to remind myself about, the strategies, particularly the pair and share, which is one of
Yeah,
my favorites for the larger classes, because as facilitators, we also have to go and teach. So these strategies really, I said the last time, at the risk of, repeating myself, once you put them in action, once you test them, you'll see that they actually work. So we
yeah.
should not just put them on the shelf to gather dust. Let us put them into action and see how it works. It has worked with me. Last week I was teaching a class, a very large class in a very small class. I mean, the physical class was very small. Learners were so many, and I tried that, and it actually worked for me. Even when it came to classroom management, I was able to manage them. Because that helped. Thank you so much, Sarah. Well
Thank
informative
you,
indeed.
Tandy. Absolutely. There's lots of different strategies, and I think we have to make sure that we feel confident in using the different strategies that are available to us. But then confidence comes with practice. Again, there's
Yeah,
lots of different techniques and strategies that you can find on our Teach 2030 site. If you complete the courses, you will find all these different strategies. And we can have a look in our ambassador newsletters where we have quick tips, where we have
yeah.
spotlights in the classroom, and where we've all shared our ideas. So thank you
Another
again.
another tip that I shared with I think I shared in my log, my July log, activity log. Another tip that the teachers came to me after our LRP, when I got a slot to introduce Teach 2030. So I was just taking there and then, taking a little bit of small bites, anything that could help the teachers, was the 10 talk, 10 to talk. And the
Turn
teachers were,
talk, yeah.
yes, the 10 talk. And the teachers were quite interested about that, because I actually said that when you have a large class, the minute you walk in, that is if you are the teacher who rotates, when you walk in and you find them, in chaos, you can actually say that 10 talk, and then they can talk, you guide them. Turn and talk to the person on your right, or turn and talk to your person on your left, and then I must not hear your conversation. Talk softly. It actually guides them. It guides
Yeah,
them to start learning to talk softly, so that you don't have
yeah.
to deal with a situation where you have to stop a lesson or walk in and start with disciplining and take 10 minutes of teaching time. So they came back and they asked me, can you really demonstrate to us how we can do this? So I'm waiting for feedback from them, and they were actually happy, and they said they were going to try it.
That's
So the
fantastic,
strategies,
Tandy.
yes, they
Yeah,
do help. Thank you,
absolutely.
Sarah.
It's a really nice settling activity. It's a really nice way of starting a lesson, like you say, without discipline, more about learning. And then as well, they're practicing communication. They've got a settling down activity, a do it now or a starter activity. And the more you do something like turn talk, it becomes a routine. So they then have the expectation on them, and they know what they should be doing. So it's a really good piece of advice. Thank you so much, Tandy. That was great.
Thank you, Sarah, and goodbye.
Goodbye. Okay, thank you again, everyone. We've run on quite a long time. It was supposed to be 15 minutes, but we're 40 minutes in, which is wonderful. Thank you for sharing ideas, and thank you for being here. If you need anything, please let us know. Please email us or send us a message via the WhatsApp, which you will find on the Teach 2030 website. Thanks, everybody, and goodbye.